Thanks for tuning in to CPA Life Rewind, where today we look back on John Randolph's conversation with the fun CPA, Yuri Kapilovich. They dig into Yuri's Mentors Count community, the pipeline problem, and ensuring the young leaders of the profession have a future to look forward to. Welcome to CPA Life Rewind.
Hey everyone, thank you for joining us today for another episode of the CPA Life podcast, where we spend time digging into really what it takes to build a modern-minded, people-centric firm in today's highly competitive talent landscape of public accounting. And today we're doing something a little bit different. Usually we're spending time talking to firm leaders, industry insiders about some of the things that they're doing to build more modern-minded firms, or what they're seeing as trends in the industry toward that direction. But today, we're going to be spending some time digging into a new community that was created by Yuri Kapilovich, who is the managing partner of Kapilovich and Associates. He's also a podcast host himself. He's the creator of the Fun CPA movement. And now, adding to that title of responsibilities or baggage that he's carrying, is the creator of the Mentors Count community. Yuri, thanks for joining us today.
You're welcome, man. Great to be here again. Thank you for having me on the show. And I think that pretty good to just go ahead and head out of here with this conversation, because you pretty much summed it all up really perfectly and not much else to add. No, I'm just kidding. But thank you. I really appreciate you having me on the show.
You're juggling a lot of balls. I think that's probably goes well with your personality, because you seem to be somebody that likes to keep things moving and keep things moving forward. And so something like Mentors Count is an opportunity for you not only to continue to move forward with your firm, but also now start to sow into, a generation of people that you probably, like I do, see on LinkedIn, see on Reddit, with a lot of frustrations, a lot of challenges, a lot of desires to build their career, but at the end of the day, don't have a place to plug into and say, hey, how do I do what I do in a better way, in a better fashion? So tell everybody a little bit about kind of where this came from, a little bit about your background. I know that we've had you on the podcast before, focused on your firm a couple of years ago, and kind of catch up a little bit about that. But give me a little bit of a high-level view of where you've been and how this has come about.
Yeah. I'll say this, and I'll start it by saying this, is entrepreneurship, having your own firm, is not for everyone. I say this time and time again online, on social media, because all these places online will push it as the solution. It is not. It's not the solution. It's not going to necessarily make you happier.
Right.
In fact, if you're like 85% happy at a firm and you go out on your own, you're not going to get to 100. You might go down to 40% happy because of all the hats you have to wear. All of this to say is that it just doesn't have to suck. It doesn't have to be a terrible place where you're working in public accounting, where you're not learning anything, not getting support, just working raw hours. That's really, to answer your question, that's really where it stemmed from and where it came from, is what I also once had. Back in my day, when I started in accounting, I don't know what it was, but maybe the era, whatever it was, but 10 years ago, 15 years ago, when you joined a firm, people, when you started working with them, they're like, hey, come on, come to my office. I'm going to show you the super basics. I'm going to show you this. They didn't wait for you to say it. They didn't look at your tax return and go, that was terrible, and then try to do something. It was like, hey, right off the bat, let's talk. Have you seen this? Have you seen this? And let me show you how this works. That's huge. And that now is missing. And so 6 months ago, this idea came to me, and I started building it out then.
What do you think has happened that has disappeared in that environment and that culture? And I think that it's not just accounting, Yuri. I know when I first started in the business, in the recruiting business, I sat across the desk from my manager, who was my mentor and my trainer. And she literally sat there eye to eye and listened to every single call I made. And we dissect it and talk about potential scenarios, and little things like that aren't done in any business anymore. And I don't know why that is. I've got my hypothesis, but tell me why you think some of that has disappeared in the environment that you grew up in versus what people live through day in and day out today.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think my take on it, and again, I'll only speak to accounting, obviously, That's what I know. I think that there was a mentality shift, right? In 2010, when I graduated, me and every single one of my, people who were in the class with me, classmates, whatever. The mentality was we're going to go to either Big Four or some of these firms and whatever and become partners. That was the mentality in school. It wasn't, it wasn't even a thought to say, oh, we're just going to go in there and see what it's like, check it out, learn, and dip out at, 3 to 5 years in to go switch another firm. That was not the mentality, right? And that also aligned with a lot of the firms. Like I was at EY, I was at CBIZ, I was at McGladrey, and people still took me in. These are big firms. They still took me in under their wing, and they taught me, all these things. And again, obviously it depends on the manager, depends who you have. Now you fast forward a little bit, we're getting 2015, we're getting into 2018, and people are starting to, I think, be overwhelmed by the profession. There's people leaving the profession. There's the pipeline issues getting worse. And as people leave, even if it's not the mentors, even if it's not the good folks who really want to teach, even if they're not the ones leaving, but it's staff that are leaving or senior managers that are leaving, that pressure is coming to them. Now they got to work more. They don't have the staffing anymore, or perhaps the staffing is done overseas or whatever it is. And there's a mentality shift now. Now you don't have time to take a new staff under your wing and spend all that time teaching them.
Yep.
Because the support system isn't there, so it's all on you. And so there's only so much you can do with your day. And now people are focused on getting the job done, and they're only getting more and more and more work because people are leaving in droves. And so, yeah, I mean, again, that's why the community concept came to me, because then you at least, I want to create a space for people to go to get that mentorship, to ask those questions and alleviate some of that training and, coaching and mentorship, from the folks who are overwhelmed at those levels.
Do you think that there's a mindset in a lot of firms that, hey, the average tenure of this person, and we were talking offline before we started recording, we're talking about kind of a target that you have with Mentors Count of that 6 month new hire to 5 year, 6 year, first year manager, that person that's still growing in their career.
Yeah.
Do you think that from a leadership standpoint, and I'm not saying it's a correct mindset, but do you think the mindset of, hey, the average tenure of this person is probably going to be 18 to 24 months. So why do I want to invest and sow and take time? Because, man, statistically speaking, they're out of here in 18 to 24 months.
Yeah. It's really an interesting thing. Obviously, I didn't know the statistics behind it. I believe it now more so because people just, the real difference, in my opinion, and what has really changed is that staff now are not taking the BS that I took when I first started. For my first couple of years, and I was at a very good firm. Like when I was at EY Miami and EY in general, whatever, like I had a great team and mostly everybody was good. There was a few outliers in there. And those folks, they would make the experience not great. I had a majority of people who made the experience really good. So I had that like support system in that regard. But people that are coming out of school aren't putting up with this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's probably why that track that you're talking about, that 18, 24 months or whatever turnaround time. And I get it. I mean, I get it from the firm's perspective. Why would you invest in someone that's going to leave? But here's the thing. If you invest in them and you spend the time and you treat them like a human and you're, take care of your people, they're not going to leave.
Yep.
Right? Like if you spend the time and you mentor them and you show them the ropes and you give them the work that they want to do, pay them well. I know that there's a big list of things I'm saying here, but if you do these things and you treat them well and they're happy with it, they're not going to leave. So you're creating the self-fulfilling prophecy here that they're going to leave in 24 months and it's going to happen.
I can't remember exactly how one of my mentors put it years ago when I was frustrated, and again, in the recruiting industry, we've got 80, 90% turnover, statistically speaking, in that first year. This is a hard business.
Yeah.
And I was talking to one of my mentors early in my career about the whole concept of investing in training and developing and mentoring into people that who knows if they're going to be here. And he said something to the effect of, you're right, there's a high likelihood they could leave.
Yeah.
What's even worse, though, is if you don't teach them and train them and they stay.
Ooh, that's another good perspective.
Yeah, because now you got somebody that's 2 years into your firm that doesn't know what they're doing.
Yeah. Like, are you just banking on them leaving?
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly. And so, If leadership could look at situations and say, hey, you know what, this person may leave. This person may leave.
Yeah.
But there's a chance that, like you said, treat them well, we pay them well, we give them an environment and a culture that they can grow and thrive and be mentored in, whether that is externally through something like Mentors Count or internally within our firm.
Yeah.
If they stay, we've got a great person. If they leave, they're going to speak well of us. And who's to say in the world that we live in today that 2 to 5 years from now, we don't bring them back as a manager,
100%.
or God forbid, they go to work at one of our clients. Whole lot of dynamics there. So let's talk about Mentors Count and kind of what your vision is. And you put this in place a couple of months ago now. Is that right? 6 weeks?
2 weeks. 2 weeks, actually.
2 weeks.
Yeah, 2 weeks ago it went live. I mean, it's been in play, like I said, 6 months. I've been in the weeds of planning it out, thinking of the layout of everything, how I'm going to plan it out, how it's going to look, how it's going to function in my mind. What spaces they're called, within the community, what spaces they're going to be there, what discussion threads, stuff like that. But yeah, but 2 weeks is been live for now.
And what's been kind of the response that you've gotten from the world, I guess, your network?
Yeah.
What's been the response that you've gotten and how things played out?
I mean, so far it's been, I want to say, I'm critical of myself a lot, right? And I mean, we usually are, right?
Yeah.
But I would say it's like 80%, 85% where my mind wanted it to be when I created it. We got conversations in there from everything from obviously introductions and people just being super friendly and super supportive of each other to really fairly complex tax, international tax around FDAP and this other, other stuff like that. Because we got a couple international people in there. We got some state and local specificities, 1040, tax technical, all the way to, recently there was somebody that made a post that said, I'm a recently promoted tax manager. And, what should I look out for when I'm reviewing a tax return to make sure that I catch what are some common things? So it's a blend. It's a blend of everything, but that's the ideal, kind of conversations, the ideal way to go, because it really, to me, it's the place where anyone can join, right? But like those 6 months to 5 years, where it's that pivotal time where you're trying to learn as much as possible, be a sponge, where they can just go and ask those questions that they don't want to ask their manager in fear of looking a certain way.
Mm-hmm. And I think that part of it also, Yuri, is, again, in the world that we live in today, the post-COVID world, we've got a lot of hybrid and remote employees and situations out there. So I think that some of those in-person mentoring opportunities, and let me preface all of this with, I run a remote firm. I am completely, totally on board with remote as a way to run a business.
Yeah.
So I'm not sitting here saying that it's a bad thing. I don't think it is. I think you have to be intentional as a leader. But I think that one of those things that can get, can fall by the wayside is the mentoring development and those in-person bump in the hall, run into the kitchen interactions of, hey, Yuri, you got a quick minute? I'm having trouble with a return that I'm reviewing.
Yeah.
And it's one of the first times I've ever seen a return like this. Can I take 5 minutes of your time, dude? Those things don't happen like they used to.
Yeah. And it's funny you mentioned this because I actually tell everybody, if anybody asks me, and I've had these calls before, people ask me my advice, stuff like that. I say, my advice, if somebody is looking in that range, is actually to at least be hybrid in the ideal scenario, because what you just said about bumping into someone in the hallway, the proverbial knock on the door of a partner's office or a manager's office or whatever it is. Hey man, dude, I'm, really struggling with this return. I can't get it to balance. I can't get it to make sense. I can't seem to get this to populate or whatever it is. And I don't, the firm can be as intentional as they possibly can and as supportive. And I've seen it. And I've seen good firms that can do this remotely. But here's the thing: it's you're still living. I call it like living by the color, of the status bar on Teams or on whatever they use. You're sitting there and you're going, okay, I'm really struggling. I got to talk to this guy. Damn it, he's on on red or on a call, and you're not gonna bother them. You're not gonna message them. But if they were in the office and you walk up to the door and you knock and you're oh, you're on a call, and then they're like, oh, sorry, I'm on a call. Come back later. You'll catch them eventually at some point in the day.
Yeah.
Whereas otherwise, you're just sitting there and just creeping on their light status. Like, so from that perspective, I mean, it's so important in those pivotal years and those important years. And even mentors count aside, the growth is there. The growth is in being at the firms, being on location. And I know it sounds old school, but I think there's so much value to it. I'm not saying that, like I said, I'm not saying that people do it wrong. I'm just saying that you can do it in a good way, but it's still that part is missing.
Yeah, I'll be the first to admit there is some of that, what I call connective tissue
Yeah.
that is built in person.
Yes.
It just is. There's a lot of forgiveness and friendship, and those friendships are built face to face, over lunches,
Mm.
over a donut in the break room. Those things are built when you have the ability to do those things. In the world we live in today, not every firm is leaning into that. And so you got to figure out a way to create that cohesiveness. So,
Yeah.
and we talked again a little bit about this offline, but when you started this, 6 months ago in your head and then began building it and putting it together and kind of where you are 2 weeks into this, how much of it did you believe was going to be more tax technical mentoring development, needed support
Yeah.
versus career advice, mental support, challenges with, my boss, challenges with colleagues, anything along those lines?
Yeah. In my vision, like when I pictured it during those 6 months of building it, and in my mind, I actually pictured the soft skills, I call it, like the communication skills, scheduling skills, how to ask for a raise, those kind of conversations, mental health, those kind of things. I actually envisioned those being higher in the conversation flow. But as of right now, I would say it's probably leaning more a bit towards a tax technical
Mm-hmm.
aspect because I think people do need that support, especially at some of these smaller mid-sized firms where there's not a state and local tax expertise group,
Right.
or and somebody needs a resource outside and maybe they don't want to look a certain way and ask the basic question. So there's been some of that, but I would say I also do realize that it's going to take time. Somebody isn't going to be so comfortable. Some of these things are sensitive topics, right? And tougher to talk about. So I think it's going to build over time in my dream world. But yeah, that's what I would say.
Well, I think you're right. I think they're sensitive topics. I think that people are concerned about, how do I have this conversation? How do I even bring it up?
Yeah.
I think that there's at times the fear of, what are they going to say? Do they think that I'm making a mistake? All of those things that people deal with. It's akin to, so many times in talking to candidates, we'll be talking to them about a job and just finding out who they know. And they may say something like, well, I don't know anybody that's looking.
Yeah.
And I'll have to nicely remind them, look, I respect that you don't know anybody that's looking, but I have a question for you. Hey, the last time you made a job change, did you send an email out to everybody in the firm
Right.
that you're looking for a job? Or, put on a sandwich board and walk around the office that says point recruiters towards me? No, you didn't, but you were looking.
Yes.
And in your mind, you were thinking. So all of those things that people deal with mentally and emotionally, I think you're right. I think it's just going to take time. I would encourage you guys, as you're building this out, to do some things like that proactively, even if people aren't asking for it, because I think there's a need there that people, especially like you said, hey, how do I ask for a raise? We're in the middle of review season.
Yep. Yep.
You know,
This is the
yeah,
season.
and I know people are kind of thinking in the back of their mind, how do I broach this subject? How do I have this conversation? One of the things that you mentioned before we started recording was a little bit of a surprise that there's been a pretty decent response from people out of small to mid-sized firms where you thought it'd be people out of larger firms
Yeah.
possibly coming your way. Kind of talk to me about that and why you think that's happening and the value in that you see with where you can bring value to not only the individual, but indirectly the firms they work for.
Yeah. So it was a really interesting observation. When you roll something out like this, honestly, it's not almost like it is a new business.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't expect it to be like that. But the more I got into the trenches of building it out and thinking about all this stuff, it was taking up so much time that I was like, this is like, I'm doing another business here.
Yeah.
And when you do that, you learn stuff, much like you learn stuff when you have your own firm and whatever, and you're building that out. You also learn stuff as you're about the people that's going to benefit most. I think that there hasn't been a whole ton of people. Honestly, I don't even think maybe like one from a bigger firm that joined. But the reason, in my opinion, the reason why people from a bigger firm don't join is there's just so many resources within the bigger firms. Like when I was at EY or even some of the smaller ones, not as big as EY, like the Eisen Rampers or the Cohn Resnicks, I mean, every single expertise you could think of, international tax, state and local tax, what they used to call like Fed tax, or, national tax is what they would call it. That's like, those are some real, like, just extremely sharp people that knew answers about the most complex things off the top of their head. Those resources are available within a Teams call / message away, or email, or whatever it is. And so, in my opinion, that's probably why folks from larger firms probably won't necessarily see the value right away. But the small to medium sized firms is where the crunch, like, you only have, let's say 10, 15, 20 people. They're all busy. Management is busy. Everybody's busy. And so those kind of questions, especially if it's something that it's pretty basic and you're just scared to ask because the repercussions of that may be, just being viewed a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I feel like a lot of people that have joined just feel more comfortable in that, to say, hey, I don't want to go to my senior manager and ask him what an itemized deduction is. Like,
Yeah.
even though it's plain basic, then sometimes I generate the conversation myself in there with a post like, hey, here's the difference between itemized and standard or whatever. But, I know it'll help somebody, or I hope it'll help somebody in that space. So I think there's benefit to any firm size in there, but I could see how, the mentorship side and the time and the resources could be more akin to also a smaller or medium firm.
And I think it's important to point out also, and I think you even mentioned this in one of your previous posts on LinkedIn when you were launching Mentors Count a couple of weeks ago, that this is not another subreddit.
Yeah.
Let's bitch about all the problems that exist.
Yeah.
How are you managing that, and what's your thoughts around making sure that we don't let that happen?
Yeah. I mean, like we were talking about offline too, venting, complaining, and all that stuff is important. It's, I mean, quite frankly, it's in our DNA, right? It's how a lot of us just kind of get things off of our chest, because keeping it on there is not good either. The only difference is that when you go on Reddit, it's just so negative with no solution. It's just negativity, and people are like, oh, this is terrible. I hate it. This is so bad. But the thing is, that yields no solution. And all it does is, like, just creates a problem. And then everybody just says, oh, yeah, it is terrible. And you move on.
Yeah. I call it raking leaves.
Yes.
All we're doing is we're just raking leaves. We're just moving shit around on the top. That's all
Yes.
we're doing. No one's digging down and getting to the roots of the problem.
Yeah. You're not raking them into a nice pile to put into the trash. You're just moving it from one side of the lawn to the other side of the lawn.
Yeah.
It's really what you're doing. And so, yeah, and there's really two things that Mentors Count is not. And that is, it's not a place where, to just go and aimlessly complain, without wanting to actually solve it and have a solution within it. And the other thing, it's not really a place for people that want to start their firms, or, stuff like that. Like, it's not a place where, you go to get advice on how to start your firm. That you can go, to Logan Graff's community called Counter, and I've sent multiple people there already.
Mm-hmm.
I don't need you to join and then discover that that's not for you. It's really not for that, because those communities exist already.
Right. Yeah. There's several communities that can give people kind of a launching pad to go in and do that. So,
Yeah.
Again, I think that person that is in that 6 month, 1 year to 5 year, 6 year, still trying to get their legs underneath them, it's a great place for them to dig into. You've also, I think I've seen some posts, you've had a couple of other people that have stepped up to help with some other mentoring. Can you talk about who else is kind of a part of helping you put this together and be there as a resource?
Yeah. So it's interesting. 4 years I've been posting on LinkedIn, right? More or less daily, which is kind of wild to think. Over those 4 years, I've connected with some incredible people in the profession, and we gravitated towards each other because all the folks that I've connected with have that mentorship side to them. Then they want to help people. And, we got folks like Henry Huey, who is very active on LinkedIn posting. He does a lot of tax technical stuff. In fact, for us, he's made 4 videos that he shared with me that I could post in the group, in the community, about how to prepare a 1040 from scratch. So he's a mentor in there. Brandon Morahan, who is also pretty active on LinkedIn, talking about a bunch of different things, but is a very kind of modest and mentor open person. We got Dominic, who's got the Big Four Transparency podcast. He's on there as well as one of the mentors. And then there's just folks who just joined. I honestly was thinking to myself initially, I was like, people are going to join and there's not going to be any mentors except me. But interestingly enough, like the first 10, maybe 15 people that joined were of like the 10 to 15 to 20-year experience folks that, I mean, obviously are on LinkedIn, but have seen and just were like, yeah, I love what the concept here. I love what you're building. So appreciate those folks tremendously. But yeah, but there's just a ton of good people in there. And we're growing. There's going to be more people that are going to join. They're going to be on the mentor side of things and people who just aren't just going to feed you the, proverbial, like what you want to hear crap that you're going to get at the firms if you do ask there.
Yeah, I think that's important. That I know that personally speaking, when I look back in my career at the mentors that were some of the most profound people in my career, even growing up, thinking about coaches that were the most formidable in my life, they were the people that were truthful, honest, candid, and at times tough.
Yeah.
Held you to a higher standard, made you think a little bit more, didn't just say, hey, what you're feeling is true, is right, and you have every right to feel that way. That's great, but
not helpful.
No, sometimes we need people in our life. I've got a mentor that a few years ago I was dealing with some stuff about 10 years ago, and he was the first guy I leaned into when I started going through some of this stuff.
Yeah.
And about 2 weeks later, he called me and he's like, hey, how you doing today? And I said, Mike, I'm doing a lot better. And I started talking about some progress I had made over those last 2 weeks. He's like, good, because my call today was going to be calling you and tell you, hey, I think it's time that you get up off your butt and stop wallowing in your self-pity and start taking some steps forward.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and these conversations are needed, certainly, so many aspects of it. And then actually in July here, we're going to also be starting the actual video series. So now that we're 2 weeks in, I'm going to begin, the actual, like some tax technical stuff we're going to have. We're going to have some of the softer skills, just videos are going to be recorded too, that if somebody joins, in a month from now, I'll still be able to access those.
That's awesome. So if people are interested in finding out more about the community, digging into it, potentially joining, what is the best way to get information and potentially join Mentors Count?
So the best way, honestly, is just if you go on www.mentorscount.com. It's the name of the website. Pretty straightforward. All the information is going to be there. We try to make a landing page that was, explanatory of everything that's in there. Beyond that, obviously, my own, LinkedIn profile, Yuri Kapilovich. On there, you can find me. Feel free to shoot me a DM. I'll take a look. I'll be on the lookout for it and everything. I'm taking some time off of social media for like a month or two, but I'll be looking out for some of those messages and stuff like that. And yeah, that's really where you can go. And of course, at the end of the day, I tell everybody this, that's like on short, like it's $24.99, $25 a month, right? I don't have no commitments for anything. I don't even have an option in there where you can prepay for a year because I don't need it. So come check it out for a month, give it a try and see. The only thing I'll say is if mentorship, like the one caveat that I would have about that is we're still growing and I'm still adjusting and I'm learning myself so much here about the kind of content and what's relevant and what's important to people from a mentorship perspective. So like if you're going to join, maybe join in like 2 months and give it that month try just so I can get my bearings around, everything, the content. And by then there'll be a ton of content in there already. So there's going to be a little bit more of a concept of where we're going.
I think that anybody that looks at the price and the investment and is concerned about it needs to think about the money that we've all probably wasted signing up for some kind of a membership or a software access that, we're 3 to 6 months into it before we realize, holy crap, I just spent $200 on something that I really didn't like after month one. So at a price point that you're talking about, there's at least some value that they're going to get when it comes to their career, understanding technical pieces of what they do, but also more than that, making themselves a better person, which is only going to make them a better person in the marketplace, whether they stay at the firm they're with long term or they look at potentially making job changes. Either way, it's going to make them a better person in the marketplace.
100%. And I think from the firm's perspective, there's the other side of it. A firm that's willing to offer that to their people, and this is down the line, of course, again, they have to prove a lot of value for firms to consider that and offering it for their people. But in my mind, a firm that's going to offer their staff, the ability, hey, when you come on board, you got a membership to Mentors Count on us, so to speak, and go in there. And if we're not providing the mentorship and you're feeling like you need something else, go in there. It's for you. We're not monitoring it. It's not associated with the firm, and, offer that. So just another avenue for firms to be different.
Yep. Which is something that I think more firms have the opportunity to do in the marketplace today. Unless you're an EY or a Deloitte or some other big, top 100 firm where you could throw money and you could throw people at the problem,
Yeah.
most firms don't fall into that bucket.
Nope. Unfortunately not.
They got to figure out a way to leverage their relationships to get the things in place they need to get in place. So, Yuri, I can't thank you enough for taking some time to hang out today and talk about the new community and how you and several others are really working to give industry professionals a place to gather, talk, share about some of the ideas that they're facing with, the issues that they're challenged with, some of those things that aren't always easy to discuss in their firm. So I appreciate what you're doing and appreciate the time you took today.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you as always supporting my stuff. I really appreciate the friendship and everything, and thank you for having me on the show.
Hey, you're more than welcome. And for those of you that took some time to hang out with us today, we're going to have links to the Mentors Count website down below in the show notes. We'll have a link to Yuri's profile on LinkedIn if you want to DM him and ask some questions. But if you like what you heard, give us a like on the social media platform of your choosing, the one that you tend to stream with most. Subscribe to the podcast so that you don't miss any of the upcoming guests that we have lined up over the next few weeks. Leaders and industry insiders that are going to give us a little bit of a look on what it is to be a part of this thing called CPA Life. Until next time.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcasting app, leave a 5-star rating, and visit our website for links and show notes at cpalifepodcast.com. We'll see you next time on CPA Life. ProfessionalProductions.net